Some men collect art, others hoard wealth. But Damien Thorne collected minds, and Elena Ross possessed the most exquisite one he had ever encountered. For 3 years, he had been orchestrating her career from the shadows, while she remained blissfully unaware. But Damien was about to discover that stalking someone's soul meant risking the exposure of his own. The report landed on Damien Thorne's desk at exactly 3:17 a.m., delivered through the company's anonymous suggestion portal like a ghost, materializing in his executive suite. He should have been home, should have been sleeping, but insomnia had become his most faithful companion since taking over Thorne Industries 5 years ago. The analysis was devastating in its precision, elegant in its logic, and absolutely prophetic in its predictions. Market analysis, emerging biotech vulnerabilities and strategic acquisition opportunities. Whoever had written it possessed an understanding of market dynamics that surpassed most of his senior executives, a strategic mind capable of seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. Damien read it 3 times before dawn, each pass revealing new layers of insight that made his pulse quicken with something he hadn't felt in years: intellectual excitement. Somewhere in his company, hidden among thousands of employees, was a mind that could match his own. The investigation took 6 weeks of careful detective work. When the trail finally led to Elena Ross, a mid-level strategist in the market research department, Damien felt something shift in his chest, a recognition so profound it bordered on the mystical. Elena Ross. 29 years old, MBA from Northwestern, 5 years at Thorne Industries in positions that kept her buried 3 levels below the executive floor. Her employee photo showed serious dark eyes and brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, the kind of person who moved through corporate hallways like a shadow, competent but invisible, brilliant but overlooked. She was perfect. More than perfect. She was exactly what he hadn't known he was searching for. Her anonymous reports revealed a mind that operated on frequencies most people couldn't even perceive. Within a month, Damien had restructured Elena's workload without her knowledge, ensuring that her projects landed on desks where they would receive proper attention. He began, coincidentally, attending meetings where her insights would be shared, watching from the back of conference rooms as executives unknowingly implemented strategies born from her suggestions. The coffee shop on the building's ground floor became his surveillance post. Every morning at 7:43, Elena arrived with her worn leather briefcase and ordered the same thing: large coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream. She always chose the corner table by the windows, spreading out reports with methodical precision. Damien began arriving at 7:30, positioning himself where he could watch her morning ritual without being observed. He learned that she tapped her pen against her lip when deep in thought, that she smiled slightly when she discovered connections others had missed, that she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when pleased with her work. He memorized her schedule, her preferences, her patterns. The knowledge was intoxicating. Each discovered detail felt like a small victory, another piece of the Elena Ross puzzle that he was methodically assembling. On a gray Thursday morning in November, Damien made his first direct move. Elena's latest report had identified a potential acquisition target that could revolutionize their pharmaceutical division. He called a meeting of senior executives and specifically requested that Elena present her findings. Watching her stand at the head of the conference table, fielding questions from men twice her age with quiet confidence and devastating competence, Damien felt something ignite in his chest that had nothing to do with business strategy. Elena Ross wasn't just brilliant, she was magnetic. When the meeting ended and the executives filed out, Elena remained behind to gather her materials. Damien approached her table, close enough to smell the subtle vanilla scent of her shampoo. "Exceptional work," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your analysis was illuminating." Elena looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time in 5 years of sharing the same building. Her gaze was direct, intelligent, completely unafraid. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice steady despite the flush that colored her cheeks. "I'm glad the research was useful." Useful. The understatement was so characteristic of her that Damien almost smiled. Her research hadn't been useful. It had been revolutionary. "I'll be watching for your future contributions," he said, allowing just a hint of promise to color his tone. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment to find a package waiting outside her door. Inside was a first-edition copy of Peter Drucker's The Practice of Management, the book she had mentioned wanting to read in a casual conversation 3 months earlier, a conversation that had taken place in a break room where Damien had been reviewing quarterly reports at a nearby table. She would never know he had been listening. But as Elena stood in her doorway, holding the book that represented someone's careful attention to her desires, she felt something shift in her chest. The unsettling sense that someone, somewhere, was paying very close attention to who she really was. Someone was watching Elena Ross. Someone was listening. The question that would haunt her dreams was what happened when the invisible thread connecting them finally became visible to them both. Elena's productivity skyrocketed over the following weeks, fueled by an energy she couldn't quite explain. The mysterious book had unsettled her in the most intriguing way possible. Someone in her orbit possessed not only the resources to acquire rare first editions, but also the attention to detail necessary to remember an offhand comment about strategic management theory. 30 floors above, Damien watched her increased activity through security monitors and departmental reports with the satisfied attention of a conductor observing his orchestra fall into perfect rhythm. Elena's workspace had become his favorite view. He had memorized the way she arranged her reference materials, the precise angle at which she positioned her monitor, the small collection of succulent plants that she tended with methodical care. The departmental review provided the perfect excuse to visit Elena's floor, something he had never done in 5 years as CEO. His presence in the research division created palpable tension. Employees straightened in their chairs and attempted to look industrious under the scrutiny of the man who controlled their professional destinies. But Elena, when Damien finally reached her corner workspace, appeared utterly absorbed in a complex market projection that covered 3 monitors and cascading spreadsheets. She didn't notice his approach until his shadow fell across her keyboard. "Mr. Thorne," she said, removing her reading glasses with fluid motion. "Is there something specific you need to review?" For the next 40 minutes, Elena guided him through her research process with focused intensity. She explained her data sources, her analytical frameworks, her decision to weight certain market indicators more heavily than traditional models suggested. Her voice gained confidence as she spoke, her hands moving expressively as she illustrated complex relationships. Damien found himself leaning closer, ostensibly to see the charts more clearly, but actually to study the way Elena's eyes lit up when she discovered unexpected correlations. She was beautiful, he realized. Not conventionally, but with the kind of beauty that revealed itself slowly. "Your risk assessment matrix," he said, pointing to a section that had particularly impressed him. Most analysts would consider this approach too conservative. "Because the market isn't ready," Elena replied without hesitation. "Everyone's focused on quarterly results, but the real opportunity will come when the biotech bubble contracts. The companies worth acquiring aren't the ones making headlines now. They're the ones that will still be standing when the speculation economy collapses." The analysis was brilliant, exactly the kind of long-term strategic thinking that had built Thorne Industries into a global powerhouse. But what made Damien's pulse spike wasn't just Elena's intellectual brilliance. It was her complete lack of awareness that she was displaying it to someone who could reshape her entire career. She wasn't performing for him. She was simply sharing her authentic professional self. "Exceptional work," he said finally. "I want you to expand this analysis. Full market sector review, 18-month projections, acquisition recommendations ranked by strategic value." Elena's eyes widened slightly. That's a significant undertaking." 6 weeks, Damien interrupted. "And Elena, this project reports directly to my office. You'll have whatever resources you need." That evening, he made his second direct intervention in Elena's professional life. The building's climate control system received specific instructions to maintain Elena's floor at exactly 72 degrees. The temperature he had observed made her most comfortable. Her workspace was outfitted with full spectrum lighting that would reduce eye strain during long hours. The facilities manager who implemented these changes assumed they were part of a general office improvement initiative. He had no way of knowing that Damien Thorne had spent 3 years observing Elena Ross's work habits with the dedication of a scientist studying a fascinating specimen. 3 weeks into Elena's expanded project, she noticed something that made her pause during her morning coffee ritual. The corner table she had claimed as her informal office space had been equipped with a power outlet, a small but significant upgrade that allowed her to work longer without draining her laptop battery. Someone was paying attention to her routine. Someone was making adjustments to accommodate her habits. Someone was watching Elena Ross with attention so detailed, so comprehensive, that they knew she needed power access for her mobile workstation. As she plugged in her laptop and spread out her reports, Elena felt a shiver of awareness. The feeling of being observed, which she had initially dismissed as professional paranoia, was becoming impossible to ignore. 30 floors above, Damien stood at his office window and watched Elena's reflection in the coffee shop's windows, noting the moment she discovered his latest small gift to her productivity. Her brief pause, the way she looked around the space as if searching for answers, the slight smile that curved her lips when she realized someone had anticipated her needs, all of it fed the growing certainty that Elena Ross was beginning to understand she wasn't invisible anymore. The question that would drive everything that came next was whether she would welcome the attention or flee from it. The day Alex Rivera walked into Thorne Industries, Elena's carefully ordered world shifted on its axis. Unlike the gradual, subtle changes that had been reshaping her professional life, Alex's arrival was immediate, obvious, and completely disrupting. He appeared in the research division on a Tuesday morning with confident energy that made everyone stop working and pay attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the easy smile of someone who had never met a room he couldn't charm, Alex Rivera looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine. When he introduced himself as their new strategic partnerships director, Elena felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with professional networking. "I've been reviewing the divisional reports," Alex announced to the assembled researchers, "and the quality of analysis coming out of this department is exceptional. I'm particularly impressed by the biotech sector work. Whoever's been leading that initiative has a real gift for seeing around corners." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks as several colleagues glanced in her direction. Her biotech analysis had become something of a departmental legend, especially after receiving direct CEO approval. But having Alex Rivera single it out for praise created a warm glow of recognition that felt different. From the mysterious acknowledgments she had been receiving lately, this felt personal, direct, completely transparent. After the meeting, Alex made his way to Elena's workspace with purposeful stride. "Elena Ross?" he asked. "I'm Alex Rivera. I was hoping we could grab coffee and discuss some potential collaboration opportunities." Elena looked up to find Alex standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that announced its presence without apology. His smile was warm, genuine, and focused entirely on her. "Your biotech research," Alex explained, perching on the edge of her desk with casual familiarity. "I think there might be synergy with the pharmaceutical partnerships I'm developing. Your analytical framework could be exactly what we need." The conversation that followed, conducted over coffee in the building's ground floor cafe, was everything Elena hadn't realized she had been missing in her professional life. Alex was engaging, enthusiastic about her work, and completely transparent about his interest in collaborating with her. "You know," Alex said as they finished their coffee, "I think you're probably the smartest person in this building. And I don't understand why you're buried in mid-level research when you should be driving strategy at the executive level." The compliment hit Elena with surprising force. After years of producing brilliant work that disappeared into the corporate hierarchy without acknowledgement, having someone recognize her potential so directly was almost overwhelming. "Well, your work is screaming," Alex said with a laugh that made Elena smile despite herself. "And I'd love to help make sure people are listening." What Elena couldn't know was that 30 floors above, Damien Thorne was listening to every word through security audio he had no business monitoring. The cafe's surveillance system, recently upgraded for security purposes, provided crystal-clear audio of Alex Rivera's charm offensive, and every compliment, every laugh, Every moment of connection between Alex and Elena landed in Damien's chest like a physical blow. For the first time since beginning his careful cultivation of Elena's career, Damien felt the sharp bite of genuine competition. Alex wasn't just acknowledging Elena's professional abilities. He was seeing her as a complete person, engaging with her as an equal, offering the kind of direct collaboration that Damien's position made impossible. Elena Ross was his discovery, his project, his obsession, and Alex Rivera had no idea what he was interfering with. That afternoon, Damien made a series of executive decisions that would have seemed perfectly reasonable to anyone not aware of their true motivation. Alex Rivera's new division would face budget restrictions pending comprehensive strategic review. His requests for additional staff would be delayed. Most importantly, Elena Ross would be reassigned to a high-priority project that would require her immediate and exclusive attention. When Elena received notification of her reassignment, she felt a complex mix of excitement and confusion. The new project was exactly the kind of high-visibility work she had always wanted, but its timing felt suspiciously coincidental. She had spent the morning discussing potential collaboration with Alex Rivera. By afternoon, she was assigned to a project that would make such collaboration impossible. For the first time since the mysterious improvements in her professional circumstances began, Elena wondered if there might be a deliberate intelligence behind the opportunities that kept appearing in her path. Someone who had been watching her career development. Someone who had opinions about who she should and shouldn't work with someone who might not be entirely pleased about her. Growing connection with Alex Rivera, the attention she had been receiving, the perfect projects, the ideal working conditions, the resources that appeared exactly when she needed them, suddenly felt less like serendipity and more like strategy. Someone had been orchestrating her professional life with careful precision. And Alex Rivera's arrival had apparently triggered a response that was both protective and possessive. Elena's reassignment created an immediate obstacle to her collaboration with Alex Rivera, but it didn't diminish his determination to work with her. If anything, the barrier seemed to intensify his interest, transforming their potential partnership into something that felt distinctly like pursuit. Alex began appearing at Elena's workspace with increasing frequency, always with plausible professional reasons, questions about methodology, requests for her perspective on partnership opportunities, casual invitations to brainstorming sessions. His attention was flattering, direct, and completely transparent in its intentions. "You know," he said during one of his impromptu visits, settling into the chair beside Elena's desk with casual familiarity, "I think whoever assigned you to this emerging markets project has excellent judgment. But I can't help wondering if they might be open to some interdisciplinary collaboration." Elena looked up from her analysis of Southeast Asian biotech startups, noting the way Alex's presence seemed to command attention from everyone in the research division. He had confident magnetism that made people want to be included in his orbit, and his obvious interest in her work was creating buzz among her colleagues. "The project parameters are pretty specific," she replied, though she found herself reluctant to dismiss his suggestion entirely. Working with Alex would be stimulating, challenging in ways that her solitary research wasn't. "I'm not sure there's much flexibility for outside collaboration." "There's always flexibility if you know how to ask for it," Alex said with a smile that suggested considerable experience navigating corporate bureaucracy. What Alex didn't know was that Elena's current project had no traditional supervisor. Her assignment had come through executive channels, with instructions to report progress directly to senior management. Any requests for collaboration would need to be approved at levels far above normal departmental authority, and 30 floors above, Damien Thorne was monitoring every attempt Alex made to insert himself into Elena's professional life, with the focused attention of a general tracking enemy troop movements. The security upgrades he had implemented throughout the building provided comprehensive surveillance of every interaction between Alex and Elena. Damien watched Alex lean closer to Elena's monitors, saw the way she unconsciously angled her body toward his attention, noted the flush that colored her cheeks when Alex complimented her analytical insights. Each moment of connection between them triggered a possessive response that Damien barely recognized in himself but couldn't seem to control. His response was swift and strategically brutal. Alex Rivera's requests for additional project resources were denied pending budgetary review. His proposals for new partnership initiatives were delayed indefinitely, while legal conducted comprehensive risk assessment. Most frustratingly, his attempts to schedule meetings with Elena were consistently undermined by urgent assignments that required her immediate attention. "I don't understand it," Alex confided to Elena during another of his visits, this one time to coincide with her lunch break. "Every time I try to move forward on strategic initiatives, I hit administrative roadblocks. It's like someone is systematically blocking my access to resources." Elena looked up from her salad, studying Alex's frustrated expression with growing concern. She had begun to notice the pattern too, the way her schedule, filled with high-priority assignments whenever Alex tried to arrange extended collaboration sessions. "Maybe it's just the normal adjustment period," she suggested, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe her own explanation. "Does it?" Alex leaned closer, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Elena, you're brilliant. Your work is exceptional, and your insights could revolutionize how this company approaches strategic partnerships. But every time I try to collaborate with you, something prevents it. That's not coincidence. That's interference." As if summoned by their conversation, Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent message requiring her immediate return to her workspace. A critical component of her emerging markets analysis needed revision, and senior management expected updated projections by end of day. Elena stared at the message with growing certainty that Alex's paranoia might not be misplaced. The timing was too perfect, too coincidental, too precisely calculated to interrupt her conversation just as it was becoming personal. "I have to go," she said, gathering her things with movements that felt mechanical. "Of course you do," Alex replied, his tone carrying a bitter edge. "Right on schedule." That afternoon, Elena sat at her workspace trying to focus on market projections, while her mind churned with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. The mysterious improvements in her career circumstances suddenly carried more sinister implications. What if someone had been controlling her professional development not to help her succeed, but to isolate her from other opportunities? What if the perfect projects, the ideal working conditions, the anonymous gifts were not gestures of professional appreciation, but tools of subtle manipulation? 30 floors above, Damien stood at his office window and watched Elena's reflection in her computer screen, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing around the research division as if seeing it clearly for the first time. His protective strategies were working. Alex Rivera's attempts to collaborate with Elena were being successfully thwarted. But the victory felt hollow. Elena was becoming suspicious, and suspicion was the one thing Damien couldn't afford. His careful cultivation of her career depended on remaining invisible, on ensuring that she never connected her professional success to his personal interest in her development. But Alex Rivera's arrival had forced his hand, made him take actions that were more obvious, more directly manipulative than his previous subtle interventions. And Elena Ross, brilliant Elena Ross, was beginning to see the pattern. The question that would determine everything was whether Damien could maintain his careful balance between protection and possession, between helping Elena succeed and controlling who she succeeded with. Because if Elena ever discovered how thoroughly her life had been orchestrated by a man she barely knew, Damien wasn't sure whether she would feel protected or trapped. The Providence Tech Gala was the kind of event that Elena typically avoided, a networking extravaganza where pharmaceutical executives and biotech entrepreneurs gathered to discuss market trends while consuming expensive champagne. But Alex Rivera had acquired tickets, and his invitation felt like both a professional opportunity and something distinctly more personal. "You should come," he had said, appearing at her workspace on a Friday afternoon with an expression that mixed professional enthusiasm with unmistakable personal interest. "Half the biotech leaders on your emerging markets list will be there. It's perfect research for your project." Elena had accepted, partly because the networking opportunity was genuinely valuable, but mostly because Alex's attention had become the bright spot in weeks of increasingly strange professional circumstances. What she didn't know was that 30 floors above, Damian Thorne was staring at security footage of Alex's invitation with an expression that would have alarmed anyone who witnessed it. The possessive fury that had been building over weeks of watching Alex pursue Elena was reaching critical mass, and the thought of them attending a social event together, outside the controlled environment of Thorne Industries, beyond his ability to monitor and interrupt their interactions, triggered something primitive and territorial in his chest. He made 3 phone calls. Within an hour of learning about Elena's plan to attend the gala, the first was to the event organizers, informing them that Thorne Industries would be making a significant last-minute sponsorship contribution that would require executive representation at the highest level. The second was to his assistant, instructing her to clear his Saturday evening schedule for critical business networking. The third was to Elena, delivered through the same anonymous administrative channels that had brought her previous project assignments. Elena received the message while packing for the gala, her stomach dropping as she read the urgent request for her attendance at a last-minute strategic presentation that evening. The timing was impossibly coincidental, perfectly calibrated to conflict with her plans to attend the tech gala with Alex. For the first time since the mysterious improvements in her career circumstances began, Elena felt a flash of genuine anger. The pattern was too obvious, too precisely timed, too specifically designed to interfere with her personal plans. Someone was manipulating her schedule, and they were doing it with increasingly brazen disregard for her autonomy. She called Alex to explain the situation, her frustration evident in her voice. "I'm sorry, but something urgent came up at work. I won't be able to make it to the gala." "Let me guess," Alex replied, his tone carrying a bitter edge she had never heard before. "Critical project requirements that can't wait until Monday? How did you—" "Because it's the same thing that happens every time we try to spend time together outside of work," Alex interrupted. "Elena, this isn't coincidence. Someone is systematically interfering with our relationship." The word relationship hung between them, acknowledging what had been developing beneath their professional interactions. A personal connection that went beyond collaboration, a mutual attraction that was becoming impossible to ignore. Elena ended the call and stared at the evening dress she had planned to wear to the gala, her mind churning with questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. Alex was right. The interference in their relationship was too systematic to be accidental. But the implications of that realization were disturbing in ways that made her stomach clench with anxiety. Someone cared enough about her professional activities to monitor them constantly. Someone had the power to manipulate her assignments, her schedule, her opportunities with surgical precision. Someone was exercising control over her life that went far beyond normal corporate oversight, despite her growing certainty that attending the emergency presentation was playing into someone's manipulative strategy. Elena couldn't afford to ignore direct requests from senior management. Her career was finally gaining the momentum she had worked toward for years. She changed into her most professional suit and drove to Thorne Industries, her mind racing with questions about who might be orchestrating her circumstances and why they would care about her personal relationships. The building felt different on Saturday evening, emptier, more intimate, filled with shadows that seemed to hold secrets she had never noticed during normal business hours. The presentation was scheduled in a conference room on the 30th floor, in the same rarefied executive territory where Damian Thorne maintained his corner office. When she arrived at the specified conference room, she found it empty except for a single figure standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Damian Thorne stood with his back to the door, his silhouette sharp against the glittering urban landscape, and Elena felt her breath catch as she realized that whatever was about to happen, it was going to be far more personal than any business presentation. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "I was expecting a strategic presentation." He turned slowly, and Elena was struck by how different he looked in the subdued lighting of the conference room. Gone was the intimidating corporate authority she had witnessed during their previous encounters. Instead, she saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression, something that looked remarkably like longing. "There is no presentation," he said quietly, his voice carrying an honesty that made her pulse spike with dangerous awareness. "I needed to see you." The confession hung between them like a challenge, and Elena felt every assumption she had made about their professional relationship shift and realign, This wasn't about business strategy or corporate oversight. This was personal, intimate, and completely outside the boundaries of normal executive-employee interaction. "You needed to see me," she repeated, her mind struggling to process the implications of his admission. "I've been watching you," Damien continued, moving closer with the careful movement of someone approaching a skittish animal. "Not just professionally, not just your work. I've been watching you, Elena, and I can't stop." The words should have frightened her, should have sent her running from the conference room and straight to HR to file a complaint about inappropriate executive behavior. Instead, Elena felt something deep in her chest respond to the raw honesty in his voice, to the vulnerability she had never expected to see in someone as powerful as Damien Thorne. "The projects," she said slowly, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. "The perfect assignments, the resources, the opportunities. That was you. Yes. The interference with Alex's initiatives, the scheduling conflicts, the administrative barriers. Yes." Elena stared at him, her mind reeling with the scope of what he was admitting. "You've been controlling my career, my entire professional life." "I've been protecting it," Damien corrected, his voice carrying a possessive edge that made her heart race with conflicted emotions. "You're brilliant, Elena. More brilliant than anyone in this company realizes. I've been making sure your talents receive the recognition they deserve. By isolating me from other opportunities? By preventing me from collaborating with Alex?" Something dark flashed in Damien's eyes at the mention of Alex's name. "Alex Rivera doesn't understand what he's dealing with. He sees your intelligence, your competence, but he doesn't see the depth of what you're capable of. He wants to use your abilities for his own advancement. And you don't?" The question seemed to strike Damien like a physical blow. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights that twinkled like stars in the darkness below. "I want to give you everything you've ever wanted," he said finally. "I want to create opportunities that match your abilities, projects that challenge your mind, recognition that reflects your true value. I want to build a world where someone with your gifts doesn't have to fight for basic professional respect." Elena felt her anger warring with something more complicated, more dangerous. The scope of Damien's attention was overwhelming, but the care behind it was undeniable. He had been orchestrating her professional success not for his own benefit, but because he believed she deserved better than what she had been receiving. "That's not your choice to make," she said, though her voice lacked the conviction she wished she felt. "Isn't it?" Damien moved closer, close enough that she could see the intensity in his eyes, the way his carefully controlled composure was fracturing under the weight of his confession. "I have the power to create opportunities, Elena. I have the resources to remove obstacles, to eliminate barriers that have been holding you back. Why wouldn't I use that power to help someone who deserves it?" "Because it's manipulation," Elena replied, taking a step backward and hitting the conference table that blocked her retreat. "Because you're making decisions about my life without my consent. I'm making decisions about your career that you don't have the authority to make yourself," Damien corrected, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone accustomed to being right. "You've been overlooked, underutilized, buried in mid-level positions that waste your potential. I've been fixing that. By controlling who I can work with, by sabotaging relationships that might threaten your investment in my career." Damien was quiet for so long that Elena wondered if he was going to answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "By protecting something that's become more important to me than my own success." The admission hung between them like a bridge across dangerous waters, and Elena felt herself standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything. She could report Damien's behavior, could expose his manipulation, and demand transfer to a different division where his influence couldn't reach her. She could choose safety, autonomy, the clean lines of professional boundaries that she had always believed were essential to career success. Or she could acknowledge the truth that was becoming impossible to ignore. Damien Thorne's obsessive attention to her career had given her everything she had ever wanted professionally, and his possessive protection of their relationship was beginning to feel less like manipulation and more like devotion. "The gala," she said finally. "Alex is there alone because you manipulated my schedule." "Yes. He thinks someone is systematically interfering with our relationship. Someone is." Elena stared at Damien's face, noting the way his jaw tightened when she mentioned Alex. The possessive fury that flickered in his eyes despite his attempt to maintain professional composure. This wasn't just about career development or corporate strategy. This was about jealousy, desire, and the kind of territorial instinct that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the heart. "What happens now?" she asked. Damien stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see the way his hands trembled slightly with the effort of maintaining physical distance. "Now you decide," he said quietly, "whether you want to keep pretending that what's happening between us is purely professional, or whether you're ready to acknowledge that some forms of attention can't be categorized so easily." The choice he was offering was both thrilling and terrifying. Elena could feel the weight of his obsession, the comprehensive nature of his focus on her life and career and future. But she could also feel something else, the intoxicating possibility that someone as powerful as Damien Thorne had restructured his entire world around this architecture of her success. As the city lights glittered, below them and the empty building held its breath around their confrontation, Elena Ross stood on the precipice of the most dangerous decision of her life. And for the first time since this strange dance began, she wasn't sure whether she wanted to step back from the edge or leap into the unknown territory that waited on the other side. Elena didn't sleep that night. She paced her small apartment until dawn, replaying every moment of her confrontation with Damien, trying to understand how her carefully ordered professional life had become entangled with something so complex and consuming. His confession had reframed everything, every opportunity, every project. Every moment of recognition she had received over the past months was connected to his obsessive attention to her career. But more disturbing than the scope of his manipulation was her own response to it. Instead of the outrage she should have felt, instead of the violation of autonomy that should have sent her straight to human resources, Elena found herself struggling with something far more complicated. Gratitude mixed with fear. Attraction warring with the knowledge that Damien's interest in her went far beyond normal professional boundaries. She called in sick Monday morning, needing time to process what had happened before facing either Damien or Alex in the corporate environment where their triangle had been playing out. But by Tuesday, Elena knew she couldn't hide forever. Alex was waiting at her workspace when she arrived, his expression mixing relief with barely controlled frustration. "I was worried about you," he said, rising from the chair beside her desk with careful movements. "When you didn't show up yesterday, I thought maybe..." "Maybe what?" Elena asked, though she suspected she knew what Alex was thinking. Maybe whoever's been interfering with our relationship had escalated their tactics. Elena felt her stomach clench with guilt. Alex's concern was genuine, his worry about her well-being completely sincere. But she couldn't explain her absence without revealing the confrontation that had changed everything. "I just needed some time to think," she said carefully, settling at her desk and avoiding Alex's searching gaze. "About us?" The question was direct, personal, and completely at odds with their professional environment. Elena looked around the research division, noting how their conversation was drawing curious glances from colleagues. "About everything," she replied, her voice low enough to discourage eavesdropping. Alex pulled his chair closer, creating a pocket of intimacy in the open workspace. "Elena, I need you to know that whatever pressure you're feeling, whatever someone is doing to manipulate your career, you don't have to handle it alone. I care about you, not just professionally but personally, and I won't let anyone use their power to control your choices." The sincerity in his voice, the protective instinct that drove his words, made Elena's chest tight with conflicted emotions. Alex was offering her something that Damien, for all his obsessive attention and comprehensive care, could never provide. A relationship based on equality, on mutual choice rather than orchestrated circumstances. But even as she recognized the healthier dynamic that Alex represented, Elena couldn't shake the memory of standing in that conference room with Damien, feeling the intensity of his focus on her like a physical force. "I appreciate that," she said finally. "More than you know, but," Alex prompted, reading the hesitation in her voice. Before Elena could respond, her computer chimed with an urgent message requiring her immediate presence in the executive conference room. The timing was so precisely calculated to interrupt her personal conversation with Alex that she almost laughed at the obviousness of it. "Let me guess," Alex said, his tone bitter with recognition. "Critical project requirements that can't wait." Elena stared at the message, feeling the weight of the choice that was being forced upon her. She could ignore the summons, could stay with Alex and finally have the personal conversation that had been building for weeks. Or she could respond to Damien's obvious manipulation, could acknowledge the power he held over her professional circumstances. "I have to go," she said, hating the words even as she spoke them. "No, you don't," Alex replied, his voice carrying a new edge of authority. "Elena, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Someone is controlling your schedule, your opportunities, your autonomy. You don't have to participate in it." Elena felt something crack open in her chest, a clarity that was both liberating and terrifying. Alex was right. She had been allowing herself to be manipulated, had been participating in a dynamic that reduced her to a chess piece being moved around a board by forces she didn't understand. But understanding the manipulation didn't make it less effective. Damien Thorne held her career in his hands, had the power to advance or destroy her professional future with single decisions. "I can't afford to ignore direct requests from senior management," she said, gathering her materials with movements that felt mechanical. "Then let me come with you," Alex suggested, "as your colleague, as someone who has legitimate business reasons to be involved in strategic discussions." Elena paused, considering the possibility. Having Alex present would change the dynamic entirely, would force Damien to interact with her in a purely professional capacity rather than the intimate confrontation they had shared Saturday evening. But it would also escalate the conflict between the two men, would force into the open the territorial struggle that had been playing out through administrative barriers and scheduling manipulation. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said finally. "Because you're protecting him," Alex said quietly, and the accuracy of his assessment hit Elena like a physical blow. She was protecting Damien, she realized with shock. Despite her anger about his manipulation, despite her confusion about his methods, she was instinctively shielding him from the confrontation that Alex's presence would create. "I'm protecting myself," she corrected, though the words felt hollow. "Are you? Or are you protecting the person who's been controlling your life?" Elena left Alex sitting at her desk, his question echoing in her mind as she made her way to the executive floors. When she reached the conference room, she found Damien waiting with the same careful composure he had maintained during their previous encounters. But Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, could read the possessive satisfaction in his eyes as she entered the room alone. "You came," he said, as if her presence had been in question. "You knew I would," Elena replied, closing the door behind her with deliberate precision. "Just like you knew exactly what you were interrupting downstairs." Damien's expression didn't change, but Elena caught the flash of something dark and territorial in his eyes at the implication of her interrupted conversation with Alex. "I needed to discuss your project timeline," he said, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone maintaining professional pretense. "No," Elena said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "You needed to separate me from Alex. You needed to reassert control over my schedule, my choices, my autonomy. This isn't about business, Damien. This is about possession." The use of his first name seemed to strip away the last pretense of professional distance between them. Damien moved closer, his carefully controlled composure finally cracking under the weight of his obsession. "You're right," he said quietly. "This isn't about business. It stopped being about business the moment I realized that your mind, your insights, your brilliant analytical ability had become essential to my daily existence." Elena felt her pulse spike with dangerous awareness. "That's not healthy, Damien. That's not a professional relationship or even a personal one. That's obsession." "Yes," he agreed, moving close enough that she could feel the intensity radiating from his body like heat. "It's obsession. Complete, consuming, utterly irrational obsession with everything about you. Your intelligence, your integrity, your stubborn independence that makes you question everything I do for you." Elena backed against the conference table, her hands gripping its edge for support as Damien continued his approach. You've been manipulating my entire career. I've been protecting it, nurturing it, creating opportunities for you that would never have existed otherwise. Without my consent. Because you would never have accepted help if you knew it was coming from me, Damien said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because you're too proud, too independent, too determined to succeed on your own merit, to acknowledge that sometimes exceptional people need exceptional advocacy. Elena stared into his eyes, seeing the depth of conviction behind his words, the genuine belief that his manipulation had been a form of care. It was disturbing, overwhelming, and completely at odds with every principle of professional ethics she had ever believed in. It was also, she realized with dawning horror, starting to feel like love. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Damien reached out slowly, his fingers barely grazing her cheek in a touch so gentle it made her heart race with conflicted desire. "I want you to stop pretending that Alex Rivera could ever understand what you're capable of," he said softly. "I want you to acknowledge that what's been growing between us goes beyond professional collaboration. And I want you to choose Elena. Consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of what you're accepting." "Choose what?" "Choose me," Damien whispered, his voice carrying years of suppressed longing. "Choose the man who sees every facet of your brilliance and would reshape the world to showcase it properly. Choose someone who understands that your mind is the most beautiful thing he's ever encountered, and who would protect it with everything he possesses." Elena felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like a mantle. She could choose safety, equality, the healthy relationship that Alex offered. Or she could choose the dangerous, consuming, utterly irrational devotion of a man who had already proven he would move mountains to secure her success. As Damien waited for her answer, his hand still barely touching her cheek, Elena Ross realized that her choice would determine not just her professional future, but the kind of love she was willing to accept into her life. And for the first time since this strange dance began, she wasn't sure which option terrified her more. Elena's answer came not in words, but in the way she leaned infinitesimally into Damien's touch, her body making a decision that her mind wasn't ready to articulate. The small movement was barely perceptible, but to Damien it felt like a seismic shift, a crack in the wall that Elena had maintained between them since their relationship began. "I need to understand," she said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of what she was considering. "I need to know why. Not just the obsession, not just the manipulation. I need to understand what made you think this was the way to care for someone." Damien's hand stilled against her cheek, and Elena saw something vulnerable flicker in his eyes, a glimpse of the man beneath the corporate armor he wore so effortlessly. "No one has ever asked me that," he said, his voice carrying a roughness that suggested the question had hit deeper than he expected. "I'm asking now." Damien stepped back, moving to the conference room windows where the afternoon light cast his profile in sharp relief. For several minutes he stood in silence, and Elena wondered if he was going to answer at all. "I was 12, he began finally, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear him, "when my father brought me to this building for the first time. Thorn Industries was smaller then, maybe a tenth of what it is now, but it was still impressive to a kid who had grown up watching his father work 18-hour days to build something from nothing." Elena settled into one of the conference chairs, recognizing that whatever Damien was about to tell her was going to explain everything that had happened between them. "He walked me through every floor, introduced me to key employees, explained how each department contributed to the company's success. But what struck me most was watching him interact with people, how he remembered personal details about their lives, how he anticipated their needs, how he created opportunities for advancement before people even realized they wanted them." Damien turned from the window, his expression carrying a sadness that Elena had never seen before. "He told me that real leadership wasn't about commanding people. It was about understanding them so completely that you could give them what they needed before they knew to ask for it. He said the best executives were invisible architects, building frameworks for other people's success." Elena felt something shift in her understanding of Damien's behavior, a recognition that his manipulation might have roots in something more complex than simple possessiveness. Your father taught you to orchestrate people's careers? My father taught me that caring for people meant taking responsibility for their well-being, even when they couldn't see what was best for them themselves. Damien moved closer, his eyes intense with the need to make her understand. When I started watching your work, Elena, when I realized how brilliant you were and how overlooked you'd been, I thought I was applying everything he taught me about leadership. But this isn't leadership, Elena said gently. This is something else entirely. Damien was quiet for so long that Elena began to worry she had pushed too hard, demanded too much honesty too quickly. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I know. Somewhere in the process of trying to protect your career, I stopped being your advocate and became something more dangerous. What changed? Damien met her eyes with an expression so raw, so completely unguarded, that Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. You did. Your mind, your insights, the way you see connections that no one else notices, it became essential to my daily existence. I started looking forward to your reports, not because they were professionally valuable, but because they were the only thing that made sense in my life. Elena felt her heart racing with dangerous awareness, with the recognition that Damien's obsession with her had evolved into something that transcended professional boundaries entirely. I've never needed anyone, he continued, his voice gaining strength as if speaking the truth was giving him courage. I built this company, managed thousands of employees, made decisions that affected entire industries, and I did it all alone. But your mind, Elena, your brilliant, beautiful, completely unique way of understanding the world, I couldn't function without it. So you decided to control my access to other opportunities to ensure I remained available to you? I decided to eliminate anything that might take you away from me, Damien corrected. And the honesty of his admission was both thrilling and terrifying. Alex Rivera, other job opportunities, competing priorities that might divert your attention. I couldn't bear the thought of losing the connection I felt to your work. Elena stood and moved toward him, drawn by something in his voice that spoke to her own deep need for recognition, for being truly seen and valued by someone who understood her abilities. That's not connection, Damien. That's possession. I know, he whispered, his composure finally cracking completely. I know it's wrong. I know it's unhealthy. I know I have no right to feel this way about someone who barely knows I exist. But Elena, you have to understand, your mind haunts me. Your insights, your analytical ability, the way you see truth where others see confusion. It's become the most important thing in my world. Elena reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against his hand with the same careful gentleness he had shown her. What you're describing, she said quietly. That's not just professional admiration. No, Damien agreed, turning his hand to capture her fingers in his. It's not. The admission hung between them like a bridge across dangerous waters, and Elena felt herself standing at the edge of territory she had never explored before. Damien's feelings for her went far beyond the bounds of normal attraction, beyond typical romantic interest into something more consuming and potentially dangerous. But they also carried an intensity of focus, a depth of attention and care that she had never experienced from anyone else. I could report you, she said, though her voice carried no threat. Yes. I could demand transfer to a different division. Somewhere your influence couldn't reach me? Yes. I could choose Alex. Choose the healthy relationship. Choose someone who sees me as an equal rather than an obsession. Damien's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes. Elena studied his face, noting the way his jaw clenched at the mention of Alex, the possessive fury that flickered in his eyes despite his attempts to appear calm. But you don't want me to. I want you to choose what makes you happy, Damien said carefully, even if that means choosing someone who could never care for you the way I do. Elena felt her heart skip at the word care, such a careful, professional term for what was clearly something much more dangerous and consuming. How do you care for me, Damien? He lifted their joined hands, studying her fingers with the concentrated attention she had learned to associate with his most intense moments of focus. I care for you the way other people care for priceless art, he said quietly. With complete attention, absolute protection, and the understanding that some things are too valuable to risk losing. The comparison should have been objectifying, should have made Elena feel like a possession rather than a person. Instead, she found herself moved by the reverence in his voice, by the genuine awe that colored his words when he spoke about her abilities. "That's terrifying," she whispered. "I know. And completely inappropriate. I know. And probably the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me." Damien's eyes met hers with an intensity that made her feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into unknown depths. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Damien said, his voice carrying the careful control of someone managing something that could easily spiral out of hand. "You decide whether you can accept being cared for in ways that don't follow normal patterns. Whether you can trust someone whose devotion to your well-being goes beyond what most people would consider reasonable." Elena felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. She could walk away, could choose the safety of normal relationships and conventional boundaries. Or she could step forward into territory that promised both extraordinary care and potentially dangerous intensities. She stood in the conference room with Damien's confession hanging between them like a challenge. Elena Ross realized that her decision would determine not just her romantic future, but the kind of love she was willing to accept into her life. And for the first time since this strange dance began, she was beginning to understand what she wanted her answer to be. Elena's decision crystallized over the course of the following week, not in any dramatic moment of recognition, but through the gradual accumulation of small realizations that finally coalesced into certainty. She spent the days observing both men, Alex with his transparent affection and healthy boundaries, Damien with his careful distance and consuming attention, and slowly understanding which form of devotion called to something essential in her nature. Alex continued his pursuit with the respectful persistence of someone who understood conventional relationship dynamics. He brought her coffee, included her in strategic discussions, made it clear that he was interested in building something mutual and equal between them. His attention was flattering, appropriate, and completely free of the possessive undertones that made her interactions with Damien feel charged with dangerous electricity. It should have been an easy choice. Alex offered partnership, equality, the kind of healthy relationship that every rational part of Elena's mind insisted she should want. But rationality, Elena was discovering, had very little to do with the heart's deepest needs. Damien, meanwhile, had retreated into professional courtesy following their conference room confrontation. He no longer appeared at her workspace, no longer engineered coincidental encounters, no longer filled her schedule with mysterious assignments that isolated her from other opportunities. The withdrawal of his attention should have felt liberating, should have given her the space she needed to make a clear-headed decision about her future. Instead, it felt like losing something essential. Elena found herself missing the intensity of Damien's focus, the sense that someone was paying comprehensive attention to every aspect of her professional development. Without his invisible orchestration, her work felt ordinary again, competent but not exceptional, valuable but not essential. She had grown accustomed to being the center of someone's universe, and Alex's healthy boundaries couldn't replace the intoxicating completeness of Damien's obsession. The realization frightened her. It suggested that she had developed psychological dependence on exactly the kind of attention that conventional wisdom warned against, but it also forced her to acknowledge a truth about herself that years of professional independence had obscured. She craved being truly seen, completely understood, and utterly valued by someone who grasped the full scope of her abilities. The crisis came on a Thursday afternoon, when Alex finally made his formal proposal. "I've been offered a position with Meridian Consulting," he announced, appearing at Elena's workspace with an expression that mixed professional excitement with personal uncertainty. Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships, significant salary increase, equity stake in a growing company. Elena felt her stomach drop, though she wasn't entirely sure why. "That's wonderful, Alex. Congratulations." "I haven't accepted yet," he continued, settling into the chair beside her desk with the careful movements of someone about to make an important request. "The position comes with the authority to hire a small team, to build a strategic analysis division from the ground up. I want you to come with me." The offer hung between them like a bridge to an entirely different future. Elena could leave Thorn Industries, could escape the complex dynamic that had developed between her and Damien, could start fresh with Alex in an environment free of manipulation and orchestrated circumstances. "Elena," Alex continued, his voice taking on a more personal tone, "this isn't just about professional opportunity. I care about you. I want to build something real between us. Something that isn't compromised by corporate politics or power dynamics that we can't control." Elena stared at Alex's earnest face, seeing the sincerity of his offer, the genuine affection that drove his proposal. He was offering her everything she had thought she wanted: professional recognition, personal autonomy, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than consuming obsession. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Alex agreed, though Elena caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes. "But Elena, I need you to know. Whoever's been manipulating your career, whatever power they think they hold over your future, you don't have to accept it. You have choices. You have value that exists independently of any corporate structure." After Alex left, Elena sat at her workspace staring at her computer screen without seeing it, her mind churning with the implications of his offer. She could leave. She could choose freedom, independence, the chance to build her career, without the invisible influence that had shaped every opportunity she had received over the past year. But leaving would mean never knowing where the strange relationship with Damien might have led. It would mean walking away from the most intense, comprehensive attention she had ever received, the sense of being completely known and valued by someone who understood her abilities better than she understood them herself. That evening, Elena found herself taking the elevator to the 30th floor, her heart racing with the audacity of what she was about to do. She had never visited Damien's office uninvited, had never presumed to interrupt his executive schedule with her personal concerns. But Alex's offer had forced a decision she couldn't postpone any longer. Damien looked up from his desk with an expression of surprise that quickly shifted to something more complex, hope mixed with wariness, pleasure tempered by the careful distance he had been maintaining since their last conversation. "Elena," he said, rising from his chair with automatic courtesy, "is everything all right?" "Alex offered me a position with another company," she said without preamble, watching Damien's face carefully for his reaction. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain so brief she might have imagined it, followed by the careful neutrality he used to mask strong emotions. That's wonderful," he said, though his voice carried no conviction. "A significant career opportunity, I'm sure." "It is," Elena agreed, moving deeper into his office and noting how the space reflected its owner, elegant, controlled, designed to project authority while revealing nothing personal. Senior strategic analyst, equity stake, the chance to build a division from the ground up. "You'd be excellent at it," Damien said quietly, and Elena could hear the genuine sincerity beneath his professional composure. "I know I would be." They stood facing each other across his office, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them like a challenge. "Are you going to accept?" Damien asked finally. Elena studied his face, noting the tension in his jaw, the careful way he held himself as if bracing for a blow. "That depends," she said. "On what?" Elena moved closer, close enough to see the way his pupils dilated when she entered his personal space, close enough to feel the controlled energy that always surrounded him. "On whether you're prepared to stop hiding behind professional courtesy and tell me what you really want." Damien's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing the intensity that Elena had learned to associate with his most honest moments. "I want you to stay," he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "I want you to choose the career I can build for you over the one Alex is offering. I want you to choose me, Elena, even though I know I have no right to ask." "Why don't you have the right?" "Because what I'm offering isn't healthy or normal or appropriate," Damien replied, his honesty brutal in its completeness. "Because I can't promise to love you in ways that other people would understand. Because my feelings for you go beyond attraction into territory that most people would find disturbing." Elena felt her heart racing with dangerous awareness. with the recognition that Damien was offering her something unprecedented in her experience. "What are you offering me?" Damien moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Complete devotion to your success, absolute protection of your interests, the resources to pursue any project, any opportunity, any professional dream you've ever imagined." He paused, and Elena could see the vulnerability in his expression as he prepared to voice his deepest truth. "And the undivided attention of someone who sees your mind as the most beautiful thing he's ever encountered." Elena felt something settle in her chest, a recognition that went deeper than rational decision-making. Damien wasn't offering her a normal relationship, but he was offering her something that called to needs she had never acknowledged. The need to be completely seen, utterly valued, and comprehensively cared for by someone who understood her abilities better than she understood them herself. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. "I want to be necessary to you," Damien replied without hesitation. "I want your mind to seek mine when you encounter complex problems. I want to be the person you trust with your ambitions, your frustrations, your professional dreams. I want to matter to you the way you've come to matter to me." Elena felt her breath catch at the raw honesty of his admission. What Damien was describing wasn't romantic love in any conventional sense. It was something more specific, more focused, and infinitely more consuming. "You're asking me to accept being obsessed? Over. I'm asking you to accept being cherished by someone who would restructure his entire world to ensure your success and happiness." The distinction was subtle but crucial, and Elena felt herself drawn to the care implicit in Damien's words, despite every rational objection her mind could generate. "Alex is offering me a partnership," she said. "Equality, the chance to build something mutual and healthy. And I'm offering you devotion that goes beyond partnership into territory most people never experience," Damien countered. "The question is, which one calls to what you need most deeply?" Elena stared into his eyes, seeing the depth of his conviction, the absolute certainty that what he felt for her was worth the risks it entailed for both of them. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Yes," Damien agreed, moving close enough that she could feel the intensity radiating from his body. "It's completely irrational, professionally inappropriate, and potentially dangerous for both our careers. And it's the most honest thing I've ever felt for another person." Elena felt the last of her resistance crumble under the weight of his confession. She could choose safety, conventional boundaries, the healthy relationship that Alex offered. Or she could choose the dangerous, consuming, utterly unprecedented devotion of a man who had already proven he would reshape reality to protect her interests. "I'm not going to take Alex's offer," she said quietly. Damien's expression transformed, relief and satisfaction, and something deeper flooding his features with an intensity that made her heart race. "Why?" he asked, though his tone suggested he was afraid to hope. "Because," Elena said, reaching out to touch his face with the same careful gentleness he had shown her, "I've never been the center of anyone's universe before, and I'm not sure I'm ready to give that up." Damien closed his eyes and leaned into her touch, and Elena could feel the tremor that ran through his body at her admission. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Damien said, opening his eyes to meet her gaze with an expression of such complete devotion it took her breath away. "I spend the rest of my career proving that choosing me was the best decision you ever made." Elena felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that she had just stepped across a line that would change everything about her professional and personal life. She was choosing obsession over equality, consuming attention over healthy boundaries, the dangerous devotion of a man who saw her as essential, rather than the comfortable partnership that Alex had offered. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home to a version of herself she had never been brave enough to embrace. Someone worthy of unprecedented attention, someone whose mind and abilities were valuable enough to inspire this level of devotion. "I need you to understand something," Elena said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was accepting. "If we do this, if we explore whatever this is between us, I won't be content to be your beautiful obsession. I want to be your partner, your intellectual equal, someone whose opinions and insights shape your decisions rather than just validate them." Damien's smile was like sunrise, transforming his carefully controlled features into something radiant and completely unguarded. "Elena," he said softly, "I've been waiting my entire life for someone whose mind could challenge mine. The fact that it comes attached to someone I'm helplessly devoted to is just the universe's way of ensuring I never take you for granted." As they stood in his office with the city lights glittering below them, Elena felt the strange certainty that she had just chosen not just a relationship, but a completely different version of her own life. She was accepting the comprehensive attention of someone who would never be able to love her casually, never be able to treat her as anything less than essential to his daily existence. It was terrifying, intoxicating, and completely unlike anything she had ever imagined wanting. But as Damien reached out to take her hand, his touch gentle despite the intensity that surrounded him like an aura, Elena knew that some forms of devotion were worth the risks they entailed, and some men were worth trusting with not just your heart, but your entire future. Elena's conversation with Alex the following morning was one of the most difficult she had ever had to navigate. She found him in the research department break room, reviewing partnership proposals with the focused intensity she had come to associate with his most ambitious projects. "I've made my decision about the Meridian position," she said, settling across from him at the small table he had claimed as his temporary workspace. Alex looked up with an expression that mixed hope with carefully guarded expectation. "And? I'm not going to take it." Elena watched the disappointment flicker across Alex's features, followed by something that looked remarkably like resignation, as if he had been expecting this outcome, despite hoping for something different. "Is this because of him?" Alex asked quietly. "Because of whoever's been manipulating your career?" Elena felt her chest tighten with the complexity of what she was about to explain. "It's because I've realized that what I want from my professional life isn't necessarily what conventional wisdom suggests I should want." Alex leaned back in his chair, studying her face with the analytical attention he usually reserved for market research. "Elena, I need you to understand something. What you're describing, accepting manipulation because it comes with professional advancement, that's not empowerment. That's a different kind of limitation." "What if it's not manipulation?" Elena asked, though she knew the question revealed more than she intended about her changing perspective on Damien's behavior. "What if it's advocacy? What if someone with power and resources decided to use them to create opportunities for someone they believe deserves them? Then they should have asked for your consent before restructuring your entire career around their personal interests." Alex replied without hesitation. "Elena, you're brilliant. You deserve recognition and advancement and all the professional success you can handle. But you deserve to earn those things through your own choices, not through someone else's obsession with controlling your circumstances." The word obsession hit Elena with unexpected force, partly because Alex was using it as an accusation, and partly because she was beginning to understand it as something potentially precious. "What if I want to be someone's obsession?" she asked quietly. Alex stared at her for several seconds, his expression shifting from disappointment to something closer to genuine concern. "Elena, that's not healthy. Wanting to be valued, wanting to be appreciated, wanting your abilities to be recognized, all of that is completely normal. But wanting to be someone's obsession means wanting to be controlled, possessed, treated as something to be managed rather than someone to be respected." Elena felt frustration building in her chest, the sense that Alex's concern, however well-intentioned, was based on assumptions about what she needed that might not match what she actually wanted. "What if being obsessed over isn't the same thing as being controlled?" she asked. "What if it means being so thoroughly valued that someone would restructure their entire world to ensure your success and happiness?" "Then you're rationalizing behavior that should concern you," Alex said gently. "Elena, I care about you. Not just professionally, but personally. And I can't stand by and watch you accept treatment that diminishes your autonomy because it comes with professional benefits." Elena felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that Alex's concern, however genuine, was based on his understanding of what relationships should look like, rather than what she was discovering she actually needed. "I appreciate your concern," she said carefully, "but I think I need to make my own decisions about what kind of attention I'm willing to accept in my life." Alex was quiet for several minutes, and Elena could see him processing the implications of her words, understanding that she was choosing something he couldn't support or comprehend. "I hope you're right about whatever you think you're accepting," he said finally. "And I hope that if you ever realize you're wrong, you'll remember that there are people who care about you enough to help you find your way back to healthier patterns." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes at the genuine affection in Alex's voice, at the recognition that she was losing the possibility of a relationship with someone who truly wanted the best for her in ways she could explain to other people. But as she left the break room and returned to her workspace, Elena also felt something else, the certainty that she had made the right choice, even if it wasn't the safe one or the rational one, or the one that other people would understand. That afternoon, Elena received an email that would reshape her understanding of what her choice meant in practical terms. The message, sent from Damien's executive assistant, informed her that she had been selected to lead a new strategic analysis division reporting directly to the CEO's office. The position came with a significant salary increase, a team of junior analysts, and the resources to pursue comprehensive market research projects that would influence corporate strategy at the highest levels. The promotion was everything Elena had worked toward throughout her career: recognition of her abilities, authority to pursue complex analyses, the kind of professional influence she had always dreamed of achieving. But what made her heart race wasn't the career advancement itself. It was the recognition that Damien had kept his promise. He had proven that choosing him meant choosing someone who would use every resource at his disposal to ensure her professional success. That evening, Elena found herself once again taking the elevator to the 30th floor, her heart pounding with anticipation as she made her way to Damien's office. This time she didn't knock. She simply opened the door and stepped into the space that was beginning to feel familiar. Damien looked up from his desk with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with something deeper, more personal. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said, rising from his chair with the fluid movement she had learned to associate with his most careful moments. "Thank you," Elena replied, moving deeper into his office and noting how different it felt now that she had accepted her place in his world. "It's everything I've worked toward." "It's a beginning," Damien corrected, moving around his desk to stand closer to her. "Elena, what I offered you last night, the devotion, the attention, the absolute commitment to your success, that was just the foundation. What we build from here will be limited only by your ambition and imagination." Elena felt her breath catch at the scope of what he was promising, at the recognition that choosing him meant choosing a version of professional success she had never dared to dream about. "What about the personal aspect?" she asked. "The relationship between us that goes beyond professional collaboration?" Damien moved closer, close enough that she could see the intensity in his eyes. The careful control he was exercising over impulses she was beginning to understand ran much deeper than professional interest. "The personal aspect," he said quietly, "will develop as slowly or as quickly as you're comfortable with. I'm not going to rush you, Elena. I'm not going to assume that accepting my professional devotion means accepting anything else before you're ready." Elena felt something settle in her chest, a recognition that Damien understood the complexity of what they were undertaking. The need to build trust gradually, rather than assuming that professional and personal intimacy could develop at the same pace. "What I need you to understand," she said, "is that I'm not just accepting your attention. I'm choosing to trust you with something I've never trusted anyone with before." "What's that?" "My complete professional future," Elena replied. "My reputation, my career trajectory, my ability to succeed independently of your influence. I'm putting all of that in your hands because I believe you'll protect it better than I could protect it myself." Damien's expression transformed, awe and responsibility and something that looked remarkably like devotion flooding his features with an intensity that made Elena's heart race. "Elena," he said softly, "I will never ever take that trust lightly. Every decision I make about your career, every opportunity I create, every resource I provide, all of it will be focused on ensuring that you become everything you're capable of becoming. Even if that means I eventually outgrow the need for your protection." Damien smiled, and Elena saw something in his expression that she had never expected. Pride mixed with anticipation. as if the possibility of her outgrowing his influence was something he looked forward to rather than feared. "Especially then," he said. "Elena, I don't want to possess you. I want to be essential to your success until you're powerful enough that nothing and no one can threaten what you've built. And then I want to be the person who gets to witness everything you accomplish." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, at the recognition that Damien's obsession with her was focused not on keeping her dependent, but on making her so successful that dependency would become impossible. "That's not possession," she said quietly. "No," Damien agreed, reaching out to take her hand with the gentle reverence she was learning to associate with his most honest moments. "That's love. Complicated, probably inappropriate, definitely unconventional love. But love, nonetheless." As Elena stood in Damien's office with her hand in his and her future spread out before them like uncharted territory, she felt the strange certainty that she had chosen not just a relationship, but an entirely different version of what her life could become. She was choosing obsession over safety, consuming attention over comfortable boundaries, the comprehensive devotion of someone who would never be able to love her casually. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and completely unlike anything she had ever imagined wanting. But as Damien lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, Elena knew that some forms of love were worth every risk they entailed, and some men were worth trusting with not just your heart, but your dreams. 5 years later, they had built more than a business empire. They had built a love story that would endure long after the last quarterly report was filed, long after the final acquisition was completed, long after their names were etched in the history of global commerce. They had built something eternal, the perfect partnership of two imperfect souls who had chosen to make each other whole.